The House of Commons, Home Secretary Charles Clarke addressed members of the House of Commons and took questions for a little over 15 minutes.
As the House will know, Mr. Speaker, there have this morning been a number of terrorist attacks in central London. The situation is developing, and I'm not yet in a position to give a conclusive account of all that has happened, but I wanted to keep the House as fully informed as possible. I want to begin by expressing on behalf of the whole country our sympathy for those injured and the friends and families of those who've died. I'm not in a position at this time to give precise details, but what I can say is that 4 explosions have been confirmed. First, on a tube train between Aldgate East and Liverpool Street. Second, on a bus in Woburn Place. Third, on a tube train between Russell Square and King's Cross. And fourth, on a tube train at Edgware Road Station. As yet, we do not know who or which organisations are responsible for these criminal and appalling acts. Of course, our first responsibility is to protect and support the public at this time. The Metropolitan Police are in operational command, using well-established and tested procedures. The health services are providing first-class care and support. On transport, the Underground is closed and will remain so for some time, but certainly closed today. There are no buses in central London. Transport for London will decide when to resume services later today. Overground services are subject to substantial delays. Most stations are open, but some are closed. Network Rail will try and reopen them as soon as they can. Airports are operating normally. People are strongly advised not to travel into central London, as the emergency services must be allowed to do their work in the most effective way that they can. Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet was informed this morning, and since then I've chaired COBRA meetings to ensure that the whole government commitment is properly coordinated and any necessary support is provided. The Prime Minister is returning to London from Den Eagles to chair a COBRA meeting later today. I will continue to keep the House fully informed.
David Davis.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the Home Secretary for coming to the House so promptly this afternoon. We understand only too well the matters that constrained his time. And let me say at once that join him in saying that the thoughts and prayers of this side of the House are with all those who were killed or injured earlier today, and indeed their families and friends too. And let me also pay tribute to the men and women of our emergency services. Their response to events such as this is invariably heroic, and we thank them from the bottom of our hearts. This morning's explosions were acts of almost unspeakable depravity and wickedness, planned with a deliberate intention of taking innocent life, and the whole House condemns them utterly. Yeah. This is not just an attack on our capital city, but on our country and our way of life as a whole. And it goes without saying that the government will have our full and wholehearted support in dealing with this assault on our society. We stand ready with them to play our part. I welcome the Prime Minister's assurance earlier today that the important work of the G8 meeting in Scotland will go on and will not be disrupted by today's terrible events. Now is not the time to allow the terrorists to disrupt our lives in any way. Now is also not the time for many questions. I have just 3 very straightforward ones for the Home Secretary. Could the Home Secretary tell the House what plans are being put in place to protect other British cities that may be at risk at this point in time? There's also obviously confusion at this time, but the most important thing is for the people to remain as calm as possible. To help with this, what plans does the government have in place to keep the public informed about events as the day unfolds? And finally, will the Prime Minister or the Home Secretary return to the House on Monday, when more information is known, to make a full statement on this terrible event? A prime aim of terrorists is to demoralise and divide our communities. It is right that we should be angry at today's atrocities, but it's no less essential that we should remain both clear-headed and united. We say to the terrorists, you will not succeed in setting us against one another. Britain has a long history of dealing with terrorism. We've joined together to fight it in the past. Today we do so again. For now, the terrorism that walks the streets of London has no face. But whatever its origin, whatever its motive, our response will be the same. The British people will not be cowed and the terrorists will not win.
Mr. Speaker, firstly, I'm very, very grateful for the wholehearted and powerfully expressed support of the opposition. I appreciate the remarks made by the Right Honourable Gentleman. They're in the spirit that I would expect, and I appreciate them. Secondly, of course, he is right to pay tribute to the vast range of men and women who are working to keep the city working in the way that it should at this time, and to their personal heroism and courage in often difficult circumstances. Third, when I spoke to the Prime Minister this morning about this, he was keen to make clear that the colleagues of his in the G8 meeting in Gleneagles, A, were sympathetic and supportive to us in this situation, but B, exactly as the Right Honourable Gentleman said, feel that it's very, very important that the very important work of the G8 is continued in this position, and that is very strongly the Prime Minister's view. And I want to express publicly my appreciation for the approach of the other governments as well. On the specific questions which he raises, Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that we have got very detailed analysis of what the situation is in other cities. Information is going to police forces throughout the country. ACPO is represented in the COBRA meetings that I've been chairing, precisely in order to deal with the concerns that he expresses. We will continue to provide public information in a very coherent way. It is difficult, I'll be candid with the House, Mr. Speaker, because there are a large number of rumours and uncertainties going around for perfectly understandable reasons. I make no criticism of that. But as the Right Honourable Gentleman says, that means it's incumbent on me as Home Secretary, but the government as a whole, to communicate quite clearly what is fact and not to get drawn down too many speculative routes. And that's why I've kept my statement today to the relatively short set of remarks that I have. And yes, I can confirm that we will be very happy to do a statement in full to the House next week. And Mr. Speaker, as you know, I discussed with you a moment ago that if it were necessary to make further statements before next Monday, as the situation evolves, I stand ready to do so if that were a necessary thing.
Sir Mingus Campbell.
Speaker, this is a sombre moment for the House and for the country. Let me first, on behalf of my right honourable friends, convey our condolences to the family and friends of those who've died, and our sympathies to those who have been injured. May I also acknowledge the magnificent response of the emergency services, who have once again displayed their professionalism and dedication. There's an understandable temptation on these occasions to speculate and to attempt to draw early conclusions. Does the Home Secretary agree that that temptation should be resisted at all costs? Nothing would be worse than a rush to judgment based on incomplete information. It's inevitable in these matters that the primary responsibility will rest with the government. In the discharge of that responsibility, they have our unqualified support.
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for the very clear and strong support he's just given, with which I completely associate myself. I do want to say that I think the remarks that the Right Honourable Gentleman makes about speculation are entirely correct. There is an immense wealth of speculation which can go into these events, and my determination, even as early as the meetings this morning, is to ensure that our decisions are taken upon what is known, not on what is speculated about. And I'd also say that in response to what both the Right Honourable Gentleman has said, the community as a whole, in my opinion, should seek to respond to these events in a calm and considered way, and to not to rush to judgment, to make a decision based on the information we're able to give when we are able to give it about what has actually happened, rather than on sometimes fevered remarks that can be made. So I very much appreciate the support from the Right Honourable Gentleman.
Frank Dobson.
Mr. Speaker, could I join my right honourable friend and the other two members who've spoken in condemning this terrible outrage which has occurred partly in my own constituency where people have been killed and injured? Can I join them in paying tribute to the emergency services? And it would be perhaps be right to note that while when danger arises most of the rest of us run away from it, the police, the fire service, the ambulance service, the transport staff and doctors and nurses run towards it to try to reduce that danger. And I'm sure that my right honourable friend would agree with me that the people who do that do not do it because they seek any financial reward or incentive, but because they're motivated by the public service ethic and a sense of duty to their fellow citizens.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend is entirely correct. And as a former Secretary of State for Health, he knows better than most in this House the extreme professionalism and preparedness of the health services that, to which he refers. My right honourable friend and I have been keeping in close touch during the course of the morning, and she has had detailed accounts of what has happened, which entirely substantiate the observations made by the right honourable gentleman about the courage and commitment of those emergency services, as with the other emergency services with which we are dealing. I pass my deepest sympathy to his constituents who are likely to have been involved in the events in his constituency.
The Reverend Dean Paisley.
I'd like to identify myself and associate my party and the people of Northern Ireland with what the speakers have already said. And we do salute those who have, in the midst of this trouble, taken upon themselves their duties to carry them out in such a patient way, and such a practical way, and such a way that has brought comfort, no doubt, to those that they have sought to help. Having said that, I'd just like to ask one thing of the Home Secretary today. Would he try, if he can, to see that the nearest of kin get the message first? In Northern Ireland, in the early days of our troubles, the press, the media, outsiders rang up homes and said, "We have rung to say how sorry we are that your brother has been killed," and the people didn't even know that their brother had been killed. And that brought extra sore and extra sorrow, as I'm sure he will agree. And I know he can't see that this is done, but he can take steps to see that the attempt is made to do it, so that further sorrow will not be piled on the already sorrowing.
Well, Mr. Speaker, firstly, I very much appreciate the support of the right honourable gentleman. His countrymen, his party, are very familiar, too familiar, with the consequences of these kinds of situations, and I very much appreciate his support. On the particular question that he raises, yes, we will seek to ensure that the communication goes to the families directly. But this is a difficult process, and there is a well-established process now in place at the moment to try and ensure that happens. But of course, I wish I could guarantee that we would succeed in all occasions, but we will certainly do our very best.
Father of the House.
The whole House will join with me in unreservedly condemning this cowardly and calculated targeting of innocent civilians. Sadly, it's a tragic proof that the warnings of terrorist attack on London were not exaggerated. We could only wish they were. The thoughts of the House inevitably are with the families of those who were casualties, and our thoughts are with the emergency services who are trying to help them. It's too early at this stage to identify who is behind the attack. Can I ask the Minister if, during the afternoon, any further information becomes available, would you consider making a statement at the end of business this afternoon?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I will certainly consider making a statement at the end of business, but as I said in my earlier intervention, I think we simply need to keep the events under review to decide whether to do it. But as you and I discussed, Mr. Speaker, I'm certainly ready to do that, and we'll see how the situation evolves as we go through. And in response to the right honourable gentleman opposite, in all circumstances, I'm not only ready but keen to make a statement to the House on Monday to report on the situation that we have seen. I do think it's important at this time to focus on doing our very, very best to support the public services to deal with the situations they're facing at the moment. And to be candid, that is the centre of my attention. But the issues which my right honourable friend refers to of understanding what has happened and why it's happened will very quickly come to the forefront of attention, as they rightly should. But at this very moment, my focus with my colleagues in the Cabinet is to try and ensure that we do our very best to deal with the situation we face at this moment.
Mr. Speaker, can I, on behalf of Plaid Cymru and the Scottish National Party, offer our unqualified support to the right honourable gentleman, and in condemning these unspeakable and senseless acts of cowardice, can I wish him well in his efforts to stem what has happened and to bring these awful perpetrators of violence to justice.
I do appreciate the support of the honourable gentleman and his party colleagues. I think it's encouraging, Mr. Speaker, that right across every fragment of opinion in the House, we say that our democratic methods are the way to prevail, and that we are determined to do whatever we have to ensure that those who seek to destroy that democracy are themselves unable to carry out what they would wish to do.
Ismore.
Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, Londoners were celebrating. Today, we are grieving, sympathising and waiting anxiously for news of our friends, relatives, loved ones, and in our case, in this House, constituents. But would my right honourable friend agree that Londoners have resilience and common sense, that we will bounce back from this terrible atrocity, that we will listen to the advice and we will wait before drawing judgment as to who is responsible? But my right honourable friend also makes sure that later on today, Londoners are given very clear advice as to how they may be able to get home with a serious disruption to public transport. It is essential that people do know what they need to do in those circumstances. Some of us would face a very long walk indeed if there is no public transport available.
On the last point that my honourable friend makes, my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Transport, is absolutely focused on this question to ensure that people can get home properly in the evening, and he's making judgments on that matter throughout the day. He will give information at regular intervals to ensure that people can live their life as normally as possible. On the general issue of resilience, I do think it's almost a truism to say that the people of London over generations have represented resilience in the face of a number of appalling issues, and I've got no doubt whatsoever that the reaction to events today will show that as well. But I should just perhaps also highlight that there is a much stronger and more coordinated approach for resilience across London by the various government institutions, which has been in place over a number of years to ensure that we're better able to deal with this. And I think the combination of the resilience of our governmental structures and the resilience of the people of London is the strength which we can celebrate today.
Order.
British Home Secretary Charles Clarke, shortly after 1 o'clock UK